bike wants to go fast. It's steadier that way. I've never been hurt going all out. It's just the hesitation that'll kill you.
So you're one of those guys. No brakes.
No, I hate brakes. Brakes are death.
Welcome back, Mavericks. Tonight's a One Gear Nation episode. We're talking about this, brakes. Because whether or not you ride one gear or multi, a heavy bike or a light bike, a new bike or an old bike, carbon or steel, doesn't matter. You need brakes and they gotta work. Because if they don't, bad things happen. So let's talk about that.
This episode is Bill approved. YouTube's algorithm only shares our content with other people who love cycling if you hit like and subscribe. So help us out.
Now, as a one gear rider, there's 4 types of brakes you can have. This is number 1. Disc brakes. Newest on the scene, great stopping power, good in the wet in particular. I use them on my moots, as you can see here. I have one single brake, nothing in the rear, and that is plenty to even stop my heavy ass coming up on a stoplight or in traffic. They are, however, high maintenance and more costly than a traditional rim brake. In my case, I have a cable disc brake, and that is unusual. Most disc brakes that you'll see today are liquid. They're the same thing like a car has. There's fluid in the tube, and you bleed that just like you would a car. But in this case, and on mountain bikes in particular, it's pretty rare on road bikes, but I use a cable because, like a regular rim brake, it's very adjustable, a little maintenance. You can fix it while you're on the road or traveling, which of course I do with this bike because this is my travel bike with the break apart frame. So it's important to me to have something that's lower maintenance and less hassle. Also, another thing with disc brakes when you travel in the airplanes, sometimes, rarely, but sometimes they'll have issues where the fluids will leak because of the pressures in the aircraft, heat exchange, that kind of stuff. It's rare, but it happens. Last thing I want to do when I land in a foreign place is discover that there's a puddle of fluid in the bottom of my bag, my brake doesn't work, I've got to get a bled fixed, whatever, before I can even ride. So I chose a cable disc brake, in this case, to keep it simple and mobile, no matter where I am traveling with this bike. Next, and definitely the most common you're going to find, is a rim brake bike. They grab the rim, and it's a very simple setup. It's cable operated, there's no fluids, you can adjust them on the road, they're very quick to fix, very easy. And you can essentially swap out rims, all that stuff, gears, ratios, everything. And if you have rim brakes, your stopping power remains pretty much the same, because as long as you have a rim to grab on, it's going to stop. It's that simple. Typically, you'll have a front and a back. In some cases, folks only have a front, particularly if they're a one gear rider, because they just lean their weight forward and use the front brake like I do on the disc brake on the moots. In the wet, not so good. When you get a bunch of gravel or leaves or crap in here, not so good stopping. So just keep that in mind if you have a rim brake. But if you're on a budget, or you've got a used bike you're converting into a one gear, or you're building a bike, the easiest, most hassle-free, most common parts, no matter where you are in the world, to get are right here, right now. The rim brake is very simple, and it's everywhere. So that's brake number 2 for your one gear bike option. Now, the most common you see in elitist fixed gear riders, fixed gear cycling movies like Premium Rush, which the clip started this episode, is this. This is a true fixed gear bike, which means if the pedal's not moving, the wheel's not moving. There is no brake. There is no brake of any kind beyond the drivetrain. So when you pedal, that wheel rolls and rotates, and when you don't, it does not. So the way you stop it, as you can see with these straps here I have installed on mine, is you pull up with your foot and it brakes. You push your weight forward on the bike, the rear wheel skids. That is your brake, period. And that's something to think about. Typically, this is done by more advanced riders. You have to understand what they call the wave. When you're riding this bike in traffic, in cities, in places where you need to stop and go, there's lights and stuff, you need to understand how to work the rotation of this wheel and drivetrain with the flow of traffic and lights, etc. Now, there are a ton of really great videos by Terry Bernstein, I believe his name is, on YouTube in New York City, where he follows guys with a head cam who ride these kind of bikes through the city. And they are really, really skilled. This is not something for the faint of heart. There's no freewheeling at all. It is simply rotation of the crank equals rotation of the wheel. And that takes a certain kind of skill to ride. But I've got a fourth option, which you may not have thought of. Any of you who've watched the Chicago Bike Adventure episode will recognize this. This is my Schwinn 70s steel track bike that I flew to Chicago to buy, rebuilt in the hotel room, and rode around the city. And it includes this. Looks like a fixed gear, but it stops differently. You can coast, or you can stop. Coast, stop. Coast, stop. Why? This is a coaster brake. That's right. Just like when you were a kid, you pedal and it pedals. You can go ahead and let yourself coast, and you can apply brake and stop. And in that case, when you push backwards, it becomes like a true fixed gear bike. There is no brake. There's no front brake. There's no rear brake. There's no disc. There's no rim. Doesn't matter. The only thing that brakes is the rear wheel and the drivetrain, except the difference with a true fixed gear in this is that I can go ahead and coast. Why is that important? Well, for many people, myself included early on, the difficulty in riding a true fixed gear bike is going downhill fast, because if you're going downhill fast, this never stops. You can't do this. Having a coaster brake allows you to have the best of both worlds. You have the freewheel, but you have a very similar, in fact, exact fixed gear stopping capability. You lean your weight forward, you hit the brake by pushing back on the wheel at any point, just like in a fixed gear, the rear wheel slides, you come to a stop. This is my favorite setup. It's crazy because it's from your childhood, but it's kind of the best of both worlds. You have the ability to be able to do your fixed gear riding and still coast and then make it a fixed gear again anytime you want. This wheel, this Weinmann coaster brake wheel, it's a DP18, is $130, $137 on eBay. So if you have a little bit of budget, doesn't have to cost you a lot, because the rest of the bike can be anything you pull out of a dumpster and strip down to just the crank and this rear wheel. And you have essentially a fixed gear bike, but without all the fixed gear risk and extra reward of being able to coast. So there you go. This is my go-to. I love this. It's easy to ride. It's fun. It's like being a kid again. So that's it, Mavericks. 4 choices to ride a one-gear bike. You can use a disc if you have the money and the means, or you want to convert an existing bike with a new front fork that can set you up with a disc brake. Cool. You can go with the traditional rim brake if you're low on a budget or want something that's very common, very easy to fix and replace no matter where you are in the world. You can go with a true fixed gear if you want the absolute bare minimum lightest riding experience, also with a little skill involved. Or you can go with this, the coaster brake, which is, again, in my opinion, the best of both worlds. So that's it. Remember, no matter which brake choice you make, whether it's disc, classic rim, no brakes at all on a true fixed gear, or the magic of coaster brakes, make sure you got good brakes, because there is nothing like being able to stop on one of these when you're surrounded by SUVs. So come on, let's ride.
And don't forget to pick up your Maverick SCHWAG in time for Christmas. Consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon. Get access to extras and staff and content you can't get on the regular channel.